At the end of each resolution, we will deal with any questions or objections received at that time, and you will be given 1 minute to send any final questions or objections which we will deal with after that time. We will aim to answer all questions where they are appropriate to the resolution being put, and therefore we will moderate all digital questions and provide bundled answers, as potentially multiple questions may well overlap. In terms of objections, if none are received to a resolution, the resolution will be treated as approved and will move to the next item on the agenda. If an objection is received to any resolution, an electronic vote will be opened for that resolution, and all chief delegates will be asked to cast their vote digitally, whether they are in the room, here in Boston, or joining the meeting online. You will again have 1 minute to process your vote, after which the result will be announced. Should a vote be necessary, I will inform you how to perform your vote at that time. But for now, if you are a chief delegate here in Boston, please make sure that you have picked up a voting device, which looks like this, and a smart card, which looks like a credit card, and it should already be inserted into the top of the voting device. If you do not have this, please raise your hand now, and a member of IATA staff will bring both to you. If your smart card is not inserted in the device, please insert it now with the chip facing you. You can keep the smart card in the device throughout the whole meeting. The AGM documentation issued on site, including the board supplementary report and the resolutions for agenda items 9 and 10 in the meeting, are available to delegates for member airlines via the AGM extranet site. Finally, this meeting will be conducted in compliance with the spirit and principles of competition law. Competition law guidelines for the IATA general meeting were included in the materials posted on the AGM extranet site on the 3rd of September. And for those of you who are in the room, there is a reminder of those at your seats. That's it. So thank you, Lee. Back to you.
Thank you, Karen. Now to agenda item 2, which is the election of the AGM president. And as you know, it's long-standing tradition in IATA that the CEO of the host airline be invited to guide us through the proceedings as president of the AGM. And therefore, I propose that Robin Hayes, president and CEO of JetBlue, and your board chair be appointed the AGM president to guide us through the proceedings of the 77th AGM. Are there any objections? Thank you. I don't see any objections. So, Robin, can I congratulate you and invite you to join us on the stage to take us through today's proceedings.
Well, thank you, Karen. Thank you, Willie. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Boston. I'm so excited that we are here in person on behalf of over 20,000 JetBlue crew members. It is so good to see everyone's smiling faces in person. We were very sad we couldn't have the AGM in Amsterdam last year, and I think that made it even more important that we have it in Boston. I hope you had a chance to enjoy a bit of Boston. It is a wonderful city. When I left university, I had a summer job working at Logan back in 1988 in the duty-free store, and really I think that's what gave me the passion and interest to spend the rest of my career in aviation. So we're very excited to have you, and then we have a lot of work to do this AGM. So with that, let's keep going, and again, welcome to Boston, everyone. Okay, so now moving on to item 3 of the agenda. As you know, in previous years we've asked for keynote speakers to address the AGM live and in person. This year, just reflecting the hybrid nature of the event, one of our keynote speakers will actually be addressing the AGM by pre-recorded video, and 2, I'm delighted to say, are in person. We're very pleased to be holding this AGM in the great Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the birthplace of the United States. I'm pleased to introduce you to a friend that I've known for many many years and has been a true friend that we've worked with for many years as JetBlue has grown in Boston. He also understands the importance of aviation to the growing economy. I'd like to introduce the Honourable Charlie Baker, Governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and he's here to welcome us to his statement.
I'm just going to stand here for a minute and look out at all of you attending a conference here in Boston, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, because I used to see this all the time in this job over the course of the previous 7 years, but I didn't see it much over the course of the last 18 months. So I'm just going to stare at you for a second and appreciate the fact that you're here. Now, I was originally supposed to submit a video welcome for this conference, and I was in my office last week, and the team said you need to come down and do a video. So I went down to the ceremonial office where I usually do that, and I was reading the remarks, and I said, wait a minute, is this thing happening like on Monday in Boston? Yeah, that's the event, and they said it would just be easier if you just did a video. And I said, I'm not going to do a video. They're here in person. They're going out to our restaurants. They're staying in our hotels. They're putting their faith in us by agreeing to be here from all over the world. They're giving us a taste of what life ultimately will be like at some point down the road. They may not want to see me in person, but I'm coming. Because this is exactly why people in Massachusetts work so hard to have one of the highest vaccination rates in the country. This is why people in the Commonwealth have worked so hard. And it's why there were 68,000 people at Gillette Stadium yesterday to welcome Tom Brady back to what was, in fact, the only time he's ever played against the Patriots. Now, your industry in particular has been through an incredibly rocky 2 years. And I don't know where Lisa Reynolds is. I'm assuming she's around here someplace. Where Lisa and Ed? Wow, you are really in the cheap seats today. I spent a lot of time talking to those two about what life has been like for your industry. And part of the reason for that is there's no question that Massport generally, and Logan in particular, are an incredibly important part of what we think of ourselves as in the city of Boston and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts as a global destination, world leaders in so many different areas, a place people want to come to not only enjoy and experience the hospitality and the restaurants and the history and all the rest, but to learn and to grow and to add to their knowledge base. That's always been a huge part of who we are. Which is why that airport is so important to us, and why so many of the folks who are in this room who carry passengers in and out of that freight, in and out of that airport over and over and over every single day matter so much to us as well. Now, I'm sure we still have work to do with respect to COVID and Delta and whatever the next variant might be. But I am extremely pleased to have this opportunity to welcome you in person, and as Willie said, to look out across this crowd and see so many folks who've gathered together here in the Commonwealth and in the city. And I hope you have a wonderful, enjoyable, informative, and productive conference. But most of all, what I would say to you is I hope the next 12 months are a heck of a lot better than the last 12 months, and that the 12 months after that are better than the next 12 months. Because in many respects, our ability to be a global community is dependent on physical presence. It's so much harder to be a jerk to people. I'm serious. Public life, all right? Big part of my career. Face-to-face is very different than virtual and social media. It just is. And a huge part of what you all make possible is face-to-face. Face-to-face among colleagues, face-to-face among nations, face-to-face among communities. It's a big part of how we recognize one another's humanity. And how we find common ground and an opportunity to work together and move our respective organizations and communities forward. So I'm rooting for you to have a terrific, productive, and successful next 12 months, because the more people from around the world, the more businesses from around the world you bring together, honestly, the better off we will all be as a Commonwealth, as a country, and as a global community. So we're thrilled to have you here. I hope you have a wonderful conference, but mostly, I hope you all have a really great calendar 21 and calendar 22. Thanks again for coming to Boston.
Okay, thank you, Governor Baker, for joining us, and again, your strong support of aviation, and again, Lisa and Ed and all the team at Maskell, thank you for being here today and everything you've done for the industry over the last several years. Okay, so it's now my pleasure to introduce a pre-recorded address today's AGM from the Honourable Pete Buttigieg, who is the US Secretary of Transportation, and he's here to welcome us to the United States on behalf of the Biden administration. The Secretary has also been a great advocate for commercial aviation and was instrumental in the recent decisions by the United States to relax their border restrictions, something I believe we would all welcome.
Hello, I'm U.S. Transportation Secretary. I regret that I wasn't able to join you in person for this very important conversation, but I want to thank IATA for inviting me to share this message with all of you. This gathering, of course, marks the first time IATA is convening in the U.S. since 2015, and the first global meeting of aviation industry leaders since the start of the pandemic. There's no denying that the past 20 months have marked a period of historic upheaval for aviation. But they have also been a reminder of just how vital this industry truly is. Despite the monumental challenges posed by the pandemic, so many of you and your extraordinary teams have stepped up to ship life-saving vaccines to PPE, to help travelers track their vaccination status, to enhance COVID safety for passengers, and to facilitate contact tracing. The Biden-Harris administration, including the Department of Transportation, recognizes the crucially important role of aviation for the health of our people and our economy. It's why, when we passed the American Rescue Plan, we made sure to deliver relief for airlines. As part of mine 2 weeks ago, the President announced new guidelines for international travel that will allow more travelers into the U.S., so long as they're vaccinated and test negative for the virus. And it's why we're championing a historic infrastructure bill that will invest $25 billion to modernize airports, reduce congestion, and advance sustainability in aviation. The administration is focused on tackling the climate crisis, and I know that IATA is working to provide your members with support and guidance as they put climate change at the core of their recovery. For our part, the Department of Transportation, along with the Departments of Energy and Agriculture, are leading a U.S. government-wide effort to reduce costs, increase sustainability, and expand production of sustainable fuels. We're targeting 3 billion gallons per year by 2030 in the United States, representing over 10% of estimated jet fuel consumption. And to help achieve this target, we're working with Congress to pass a tax credit for sustainable aviation fuels to help bring down costs and stimulate production. Internationally, we're looking ahead to COP COP26 in Glasgow and the ICAO Assembly in 2022, as I know all of you are as well. At COP26, we'll start to roll out our U.S. Aviation Climate Action Plan, and we anticipate working together to increase climate ambition and action at ICAO. I know that climate change has a prominent place on the agenda for this meeting as well. The decisions you make here today will have a profound impact, not just on Glasgow, ICAO 2022, but on other industries and sectors who will be inspired to follow what we do. Now is the time for all of us to go. So yes, the aviation industry is in a moment of profound change, a unique upheaval. Many of those changes are prompted by factors beyond our control, but the pandemic continues to impact so many aspects of our lives. But there are many more areas where we can shape the course of change, and I want to thank you for doing just that. I wish you all success in this meeting, and I look forward to working with you for a sustainable future for all of aviation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Secretary. It is now my pleasure to introduce another in-person speaker, Salvatore Sciacatano. He's the president of the ICAO Council. He's been a great supporter of our industry and granted IATA access to ICAO's governance bodies so that we can bring our operational expertise to their deliberations. We're so honored and happy that he's been able to join us in Boston at his first official ICAO mission. Mr. President, the floor and the podium is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, President of the AGM. Thank you very much, CEO of IATA, for inviting me today. It's very emotional to participate in person with so many participants today. This is something that was not even foreseen a few weeks ago. And I would be remiss to begin my address today with data and forecast on COVID-19 impact on international air transport. You all know very well the current traffic data and trends and the course of the relevant financial implications. For this reason, rather, with your indulgence, I wish to begin with a personal argument, which in my opinion illustrates the dimension and on the adverse implications of COVID-19 on international transport. My mandate as ICAO 6th President of the Council of ICAO began almost 2 years ago. Since taking office on 1st January 2020, this is my first official mission and my first public address in person. Under normal circumstances, by now I would have visited all over the 7 ICAO regions, and I would have the pleasure of meeting some of you in your respective country. Unfortunately, our new normal has meant that I have been more or less grounded, reality that most of you today know very well. Nevertheless, the situation is evolving positively, as can be seen by today by the IATAAGM, the person here in Boston, and in this regard, I wish to applaud the recent decision of the host country of the AGM to lift the curtain, as has been mentioned just a few moments ago, in November, I believe, lifting the requirements for vaccinated preparation virus. This decision will significantly and positively impact a great deal of interaction and trade. And ICAO continues to strongly encourage all countries to approach their traveler entry requirements on the basis of practical and evidence-based approaches to manage risk. As you know, the Aviation Recovery Task Force, called CART, established by ICAO Council in close coordination with the WHO and with the strong support of the aviation industry, began issuing a number of recommendations since the dawn of the pandemic. ICAO objective was and is to support the transport to restart the recovery through worldwide harmonized measures. recently reviewed some of the recommendations related to passenger facilitations and certification issues surrounding the COVID-19 test results and vaccination certificate. And those updates will be published soon. The real issue is that there are recommendations, risk-based, with a risk-based approach that could help restart, as is going to happen in countries like this. But unfortunately, the measures are not implemented in harmonized. So this is a reason why the recommendation will be fully implemented by member states. And the initiative that has been undertaken by IATA, the states listing this implementation is very important. And they're important for this initiative. At the same time, there is an issue of the standardization of the certificates. This is an issue on which we are working on. We have adopted the standards for international standards for certificates, vaccine certificates. We will use the platform already existing for e-passport, the same platform. As you know, you can use e-passport in any country, and this passport can be already recognized by any country. Well, the same system is needed for the certificate of vaccination. We have already adopted the standard. We are working on the interoperability. We hope that this standard and the implementation will be widely implemented by the beginning of the next year. As we work to attain our recovery objectives and international traffic volumes continue their ascent back towards the pre-pandemic levels, the increasing acute civil society demands to curb and eliminate aviation carbon emission have also grown louder and more urgent. As revealed by the recent Governmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, assessment report, the next 10 years are critical for our common future. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has identified the IPCC report's conclusions as a code red for humanity. And many world leaders at this year's UN General Assembly have reinforced this point. For our sector, the dual imperative of recovery and emission reduction underscore that we cannot waste the opportunity before us for sectoral transformation of the economy. In addition to the retirement of less efficient aircraft types, which has been a very welcome development over the last 18 months, commercial aviation must be determined to pursue further transformation. In addition to Corsia, which is well on track at getting most of the emissions-related attention on the transport these days, and in this regard, let me recall the important decision that was taken last year by the EU Council to modify the reference baseline in order to prevent a huge alteration of the course implementation. Well, I would say that what is being continuously accomplished in that moment in terms of more sustainable fuels, technologies, and procedures cannot be ignored or undervalued. Innovation in these areas deliver a win-win solution toward our complementary imperative of sustainability and connectivity growth. Equally incredible, perhaps, was the successful launch and the return last month of a permanent synthesis on the SpaceX aspiration for commercial space flight. This mission didn't emerge so above the atmosphere for a quick moment, but orbited its civilian passengers higher than the International Space Station, and for a full 3-day period, and at a small fraction of the cost of previous and similar governmental run missions. This transformation in outer space travel is mirroring the transport evolution from state-run to privately run commercial airlines. But remaining on aviation carbon emission reduction, I was greatly encouraged by the further commitments from governments and the industry at this year's stock-taking events toward the reality of the next zero 2050 of these targets. And very interesting in particular was the contribution of the Director And of course, we see the decision that we will take today, but the decision of IATA on net zero objectives will be absolutely helpful, as has been said by the Secretary of Transport for ICAO Assembly next year to take the decision with commitment of member states. I also acknowledge here that there are 14 carriers of the Association of the Pacific Airlines who announced their own net zero 2050 emissions very recently. And the equally encouraging has been the increase of IATA Airlines joining the ICAO Sustainable Aviation Coalition with Qatar Airways Group signing on last month. I encourage those of you that have not already done to do so, join the movement and to become a more active contributor in our shared pursuit of net zero powered flight. Concluding, I wish to emphasize how all aviation stakeholders must begin to re-evaluate and rethink the business organization in the post-pandemic period context. Today's passengers are increasingly more concerned of their carbon footprint as their cabin level. And if this sector, its carriers are to triangle over, once again, we must leverage the current crisis to strengthen their resilience through the disease and increase crisis preparedness, enhance economy and governmental sustainability and smart operations. At the same time, it's clearly recognized that air transport companies and regulatory authorities continue to face severe financial constraints, and that governments must devote attention and investments to ensure that they are stabilized and supported. Industry too, especially given the current strain of both financial and human resources, must assure that safety and reliability compliance remains robust and ambitious so that the transport value offering air duty safeguards. Safety is paramount and will not have to be impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic after the recovery. All of these topics will be reviewed at the high-level conference on COVID-19, which ICAO is convening on 12 October. And we look forward to align perspectives to enhance these discussions. This event will feature 3 ministerial portions, which in turn will be supported by specific safety and facilitation of technical steps. We are expecting actionable progress there with respect to align convenient and affordable solutions to validate passenger health status and get people flying again. COVID-19 may continue to constrain many fundamental aspects of our mobility and connectivity, but air transport operations are keeping the societies and economies functional and supplying in very critical ways, and shielding us from what might be have been the greater and more systematic global economic impact. Solidarity and cooperation among our communities have made this global response possible on behalf of air transport. And I want to share this. During the post-pandemic or initial phase of the pandemic, we've been facing a huge difficulty to work, and we have to work together. The industry, without the differentiation of sectorials, and regulators, ICAO and industry. This has been the key element of success of the part, and this has been what we have brought to the transport as our contribution. ICAO will continue to rely on IATA member lines, being guided by those principles as we work together to lead aviation into this very exciting future which lies in store for it. So thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you a very productive and engaging event, and congratulations again for having completed this AGM assembly meeting in person. Thank you very much for your attention.
Again, thank you very much. Thank you to all of our speakers. Okay, moving on to the next item, which is item 4. This is the approval of the agenda for the 77th Annual General Meeting and the approval of the report of the 76th Annual General Meeting. Now, the AGM is asked to approve the proposed agenda for today's meeting. This was made available to all member airlines by email from IATA's Corporate Secretary on the 6th of August and also subsequently loaded to the AGM extranet site on the 3rd of September 2021. The report of the 76th Annual General Meeting was distributed to all member airlines on the same date. No amendments to either of the proposed agenda for today's meeting or the report of the 2020 AGM have been requested. The IATA Board has proposed a motion to approve the 77th AGM agenda and the 76th AGM report, which I, as AGM President, second. Are there any questions or objections?
So I see, Robin, that there are no questions or objections either in the room or indeed online at this time. If any chief delegate or any member airline wishes to raise any questions or any objections to this resolution, you have 1 minute to do so starting now. If no objections are received, the resolution will be treated as approved and we will move to the next agenda item. If an objection is received, an electronic vote will be opened and you will again have 1 minute to process your vote. Should a vote be necessary, I will inform you on how to perform it at the relevant time.
Okay, there being no questions or objections, I declare the report of the 76th AGM and the agenda of the 77th AGM are approved. Willie and I were talking about last night whether we should retire the gavel, but we clearly didn't. Okay, moving on to item 5, which is the annual report of the air transport industry. And I now would invite Willie, if you would, to present your report.
Thank you, Rob, and thanks again, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us in Boston. So the COVID-19 pandemic that essentially brought global aviation to a halt in April 2020 is now virtually endemic. And this AGM is an early symbol of how we can work, meet, connect, live, and travel with COVID in our world. Aviation's resilience, which has always been a hallmark of our industry, is now clearly on display. Demand for cargo is tracking at nearly 8% above pre-crisis levels. Some domestic markets are nearly back to pre-COVID-19 levels, telling us that people want to travel. And while August international travel was still far below 2019 levels, recent announcements relaxing border restrictions should give international markets a critical boost. We are also seeing improvement in finances. We expect 2021 losses to be nearly 52 billion, but that's a significant cut from the 138 billion lost in 2020. Losses will further reduce in 2022 to about 12 billion. So in total, the COVID-19 crisis will cost aviation $201 billion in losses before we return to profitability in 2023. So we're past the deepest point of the crisis, and while serious issues remain, the path to recovery is coming into view. And we must now walk that path with our partners across the value chain and with governments. Because some 4% of global GDP, 88 million jobs, and the freedom of billions of people to fly rests on the efforts of many partners. Our resilience will be tested as we work together to keep aviation safe and secure, to manage the risks of COVID-19, and to make aviation sustainable. Now, only last month we marked 2 decades since the terrible events of 9/11. another time when our resilience was severely tested. Aviation is a symbol of freedom, and we witnessed horror as 4 civil aircraft were converted to weapons to attack New York and Washington, D.C. And we pay our deepest respect to all of those who lost their lives on that darkest of days, and we remember the courageous actions of so many. And we should also recall the determined effort of airlines, our industry partners, and governments to respond and to restart. As always, safety and security were the top priorities. And industry processes, infrastructure, and even aircraft were adapted to deal with a transformed threat of terrorism. Now, in hindsight, we know that it took too long to recognize that working together and sharing vital information are the foundations of a strong defense against terrorism. There is no doubt that we are far more secure today than in 2001. But we could be much more efficient if we eliminated measures that have been surpassed by technology, and we cannot allow this same mistake to be repeated with COVID. And when it comes to safety, we must always be vigilant. The recent deplorable Belarus incident reminds us that 2 wrongs can never make a right. We must stand together and insist that all authorities respect their bilateral commitments and keep safety regulation free from political agendas and influence. And the ongoing experience of returning the 737 MAX to service reminds us that we still have further work to do. We must get back to a safety regulatory system that relies on mutual recognition and reciprocity. When regulators disagree, we need them to rely on expert technical modeling to align approaches and resolve those differences with a laser focus on safety. Today, the immediate challenge is COVID-19, or more correctly, the reaction of governments to the risk presented by the virus. Now, the good news is that people want to fly and that they are confident. Under the leadership of ICAO and with strong support from the industry, we have a clear set of measures to keep travelers safe while flying. The solid rebound in domestic markets tells us that people are not afraid to fly, and nearly 90% of those who have flown recently reported that they felt safe. Now, how our partners in government are managing border restrictions, however, must be dramatically improved. Travel restrictions bought governments time to respond in the early days of the pandemic. Nearly 2 years later, that rationale no longer exists. COVID-19 is present in all parts of the world, and there is little evidence to support ongoing blanket border restrictions and the economic havoc that they create. Testing results in the UK arrivals demonstrate that travellers are not adding risk to the local population. Of the 4.2 million people that arrived between February and the end of August this year, only 57,200 tested positive. These 4.2 million people had to take more than 6.4 million expensive PCR tests. The positivity rate was less than 1%. During the same period, more than 32 million PCR tests were taken in the general population in England, and 2.2 million of them were positive. That's a positivity rate of almost 7%. So you have 5 times the number of tests, but 37 times the number of positives. And this is why we can say with confidence that flying is not the risk. Now, fortunately, risk-based measures are starting to take hold in markets that have had some severe restrictions. The EU took an early decision to open for vaccinated travellers. Canada followed. The US and UK have announced similar measures. Singapore has vaccinated travel corridors. And even Australia, which has some of the most severe restrictions on the freedom of its people, will begin reopening its borders based on vaccination from next month. Taking this recent momentum forward, our asks for opening borders are simple and aligned with the position of the WHO. Vaccines should be available to all as quickly as possible. Vaccinated travellers should not face any barriers to international travel. Testing should enable those without access to vaccines to travel without quarantine. Antigen tests are the key to cost-effective and convenient testing regimes. And governments should pay for testing so it does not become an economic barrier to travel. It is clear that digital health credentials, documentation of vaccination or testing status will be needed as borders reopen. Experience even at today's low levels of travel tells us that there will be chaos at airports if we have to rely on paper processes. Europe made a good start at the EU Digital COVID Certificate, the EU DCC, is an efficient and reliable standard to record test and vaccination status. So if governments are looking for a standard to follow, this is our recommendation. And if governments are looking to manage travel health credentials using e-gates, the IATA Travel Pass is a clear solution. Irrespective of government use, an automated solution is essential for airlines. They will need to manage documentation verification using automated check-ins. If not, airport wait times and congestion will skyrocket as travel volumes increase. And after extensive testing, it's great to see that the IATA Travel Pass is entering into regular operations. Now, there is a lot of work to do to simplify entry requirements. The recovery, I'm afraid, could be hijacked by complex made-at-home rules. For example, governments are using at least 24 versions of country risk assessment lists. Only half the 20 states with alleviations for vaccinated travellers recognise the complete WHO vaccine list. And there are at least 6 definitions for when a vaccine becomes effective. And there is no standard for how long a vaccine is considered good to travel. There are at least 10 ways to define testing windows prior to travel, and there is no consensus on the age of children for testing or vaccination exemptions. Now, even these few examples demonstrate that the situation is a mess and is stalling recovery. Complete harmonization is unlikely, but some simple best practices that travellers can comprehend should be achievable. On Thursday last week, the G7 recognized the problem and committed to doing something about it. Now, there will only be progress if their words lead to action. Another opportunity is the ICAO high-level conference on COVID-19, if it can produce concrete results, a pathway to reducing complexity, and a methodology to ensure that COVID-19 measures do not become permanent. Measures must remain in place only for as long as they are needed and not one day longer. As we do with many safety regulations, defined review periods are needed. Otherwise, as we saw in the aftermath of 9/11, well-intentioned measures could remain in place long after they are necessary or have become technologically or scientifically obsolete. We will also need the support of our industry partners, particularly airports and air navigation service providers. Now, with these guys, the issue is cost. Everybody has suffered massive COVID losses, but some providers are abusing their position. From the outset of the pandemic, airlines have undertaken drastic cost reductions. Operating costs were reduced by 35% compared to pre-crisis. This was supported by increased commercial borrowing and shareholder contributions as a means of survival. Where this huge effort was not enough, airlines had to actively seek government aid as an essential lifeline. But let's be clear, of the $243 billion that was made available to airlines, 81 billion supported payrolls, and approximately $110 billion is in the form of support that needs to be paid back. The problem is that some airports and ASPs are seeking a solution to shore up their finances by recovering lost revenue from their airline customers. Yeah, you heard that correctly. Some of our so-called partners want to increase charges to recover the money that airlines could not spend with them during the crisis. Now, while not universal, Here are some of the examples of the gouging that is being planned. Nav Canada charges will increase by 30% over the next 5 years. Ethiopia's ANSP is raising charges 35% this year. European ANSPs are asking for a 40% price hike in 2022. And on the airport side, here in the US, we've seen a spate of large increases. Airports company South Africa want to raise charges by 38% in 2022. Amsterdam Schiphol Airport is asking for a 40% increase over 3 years. And my old friends at Heathrow, well, they're off the charts when it comes to a proposed 90% increase next year. And let me just remind you what Heathrow said only a few months ago, and I quote, "We continue to work closely with airlines on the impact of COVID-19, listening and responding to their needs and priorities for the months and years ahead." Are you kidding me? Do they honestly expect us to believe that a 90% increase in charges is going to help the airline industry? Now, we all want to put COVID-19 behind us, but placing the financial burden of a crisis of apocalyptic proportions on the back of your customers just because you can is a commercial strategy that only a monopoly supplier could dream of. Reducing costs, not increasing charges, must be the top of everybody's agenda. But already, total confirmed airport and ANSP charges increases announced in 2021 have already reached $2.3 billion US. It's outrageous, and it needs to stop. Infrastructure shareholders, government or private, have benefited from stable returns pre-crisis. They must now play their part in the recovery. It is unacceptable behavior to benefit from your customers during good times and stick it to them in the bad times. Now, looking beyond the crisis, we all recognize that the freedom to fly will depend on our ability to fly sustainably. Today, we power our aircraft with kerosene. Carbon is emitted when we burn it, and that contributes to climate change. Like all industries, we must reduce and eventually eliminate these emissions. Unlike other industries, however, more than a decade ago, we set ourselves a target to address this by putting our net emissions in half from 2005 to 2050. Now, since then, our achievements prove our determination. Airlines invested hundreds of billions of dollars in more fuel-efficient aircraft. Fleet fuel efficiency improved by over 20% in a decade. Sustainable aviation fuel use grew from 8 million litres in 2016 to over 100 million litres this year. And the world's only sector-wide offsetting scheme, CORSIA, has stabilized emissions at 2019 levels. And this is good progress towards a target that will be both expensive and technically challenging. But science tells us that the situation is even more urgent than we previously thought. And the world's response is to focus on achieving net zero emissions. Our current target, which would reduce net emissions to 325 million tonnes in 2050, is simply not ambitious enough. And over the last months, your Board of Governors worked intensively to define a path to net carbon emissions by 2050. It can be achieved. It will take a combination of sustainable fuels, radical airframe designs, cutting-edge propulsion methods, efficiency gains, carbon capture technology, and offsetting. And today you will be asked to endorse a resolution making net zero carbon emissions by 2050 an industry-wide commitment. I know many in this room, individually or in groups, have already taken this step. For others, this will be an additional challenge at a very difficult time. But for all of us, it will be a commitment behind which we must be united and determined to deliver on time. It is the right thing to do, and together it is possible. And together includes our partners. The cost and effort of breaking our industry's dependence on fossil fuels cannot fall on the backs of airlines alone. We don't use electric cars because drivers built them. The energy transition for road transport is happening because governments created a policy framework that supported innovation, and the market reacted by developing cost-efficient electrification solutions that appealed to consumers. The technology roadmap for sustainable aviation is more complex, but the mechanism to deliver change is the same. We just heard the encouraging news from Secretary Buttigieg. The Biden administration has taken a whole-of-government approach to incentivize the production of at least 11 billion litres of SAF by 2030. This is an excellent example of the leadership that we need from government. Airlines will do their part, but everyone's action is necessary. ICAO must lead governments in a global approach that has always been successful at driving change in our industry. Governments must set policies supporting carbon-reducing innovation, SAF production, and CORSIA, while avoiding a patchwork of environmental taxes. And fuel producers need to bring large-scale, cost-competitive, sustainable fuels to the markets. Airports need to make sure that they deliver the infrastructure at no additional cost. Governments and ANSPs must eliminate inefficiency in air traffic management, all of which are inexcusable, even without a sustainability mandate. And aircraft and engine manufacturers must produce radically more efficient airframe and propulsion technologies. For aviation, net zero is a bold, audacious commitment, but it's also a necessity. The important decision that we must take today will secure the freedom to fly for future generations. So in conclusion, I ask that AGMs are always a unique moment. You know, just look around this room and you'll see global leadership of an amazing industry. The connectivity we provide underpins $3.5 trillion of economic activity and 88 million jobs. And in assembling today, after 18 months of lockdown, restrictions, Zoom and Teams, we have all renewed appreciation for just how powerful that connectivity is and how important it is to meet face to face. Aviation inspires us. In little over a century, flying has established itself as a driving force for positive change in our world. Aviation's contribution to the UN Sustainable Development Goals are real. Our children grow up in a world with far fewer boundaries, reduced poverty, and much more freedom. And this pandemic reminded us of what a world with limited aviation is like. Disconnecting the planet is intolerable for people, for businesses, and for governments. Reconnecting the world and transitioning to sustainable energy sources are a big challenge. We all feel the responsibility. But if we all pull together with the support of our partners in government and across the value chain, we will show our resilience once again. Our industry is rising from the destruction of COVID-19 and to the challenges of sustainability. And without doubt, we will fly higher again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Billy, for that great report out. Now we turn to item 6 of the agenda, is the report of the Board of Governors. This is given by the Chair report, so that's me. So I'm just going to walk over to the podium and give the update. Okay, well, good morning again, everyone. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to serve as the chair of the IATA Board of Governors and to work with Willie and the whole IATA team during these challenging times for our industry, and also for the world as a whole. Like Willie, I'm particularly pleased to address you live and in person. I believe the fact that we are able to hold this meeting in Boston with such a strong global presence suggests that we are on the road to recovery from the devastating impact of COVID-19. Willie referred to 9/11. Let's compare the approach that governments took after 9/11 with the approach that many governments have taken to address the threats brought about by COVID-19. Once COVID-19 was identified, many governments closed their borders for fear that commercial aviation would serve as a vehicle to transport the virus into their countries. After 9/11, US airspace was closed, but quickly reopened, even before new security measures were put in place. Compare that to the fact that governments of countries, large and small, have maintained COVID-19 restrictions on air travel, even as testing, vaccines, and therapeutics became available. The lag between the development of tools to fight COVID-19 and the cautious reopening that we are beginning to witness has seen people, businesses, economies, and our industry suffer greatly. It is now time for government to acknowledge what we all understand, that we're going to have to live with the COVID-19 endemic phase for years to come, just as we live with flu and many other diseases. We need governments to work with industry to help us manage this reality, just as we have worked with governments since 9/11 to address the ongoing threat of terrorism. The good news, though, is that governments are starting to do just that. Here in the United States, the Biden administration recently announced that it would remove its border restrictions in favor of vaccine and testing mandates in November. We appreciate the willingness of the US government to work with the industry to make this happen with an orderly and efficient passenger facilitation process once these restrictions are lifted. We're also thankful for governments who have made regulatory accommodations to allow our licensed personnel to maintain their qualifications in a safe manner, despite limited access to training facilities due to COVID-19. However, we now need governments to ensure the free movement of transport workers and to end travel bans and other restrictions that have had an enormously detrimental impact on their well-being and safety and are also threatening global supply chains. We also need passengers to do their part. This means following crew directions, in particular around masks and other COVID health requirements. We cannot accept our crew's safety and the safety of other passengers being threatened by people who let their frustrations with COVID get the better of them. Let me now turn to a review of what the Board of Governors addressed during this period since our last AGM. On COVID-19, the Board has reviewed IATA's activities in support of its members since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic in every meeting we've had since March 2020. The Board expressed its appreciation for the financial support some governments have provided to the industry, particularly here in the US, to help weather the government-mandated border closures and restrictions. The Board thanked IATA for its advocacy in that regard. However, we expressed concern that this government support was diminishing at a time when the Delta variant and government reactions to the same have continued to wreak havoc on our industry. The Board also appreciated the strong support that IATA has provided in combating the efforts from some of our industry partners to recover from airlines the losses we have all suffered as a result of this pandemic. This is a key area on which the Board has asked IATA to stay very focused. The Board appreciated the campaign Billy and team have conducted to remove border restrictions in 33 markets, representing 80% of 2019 traffic. Today, 7 of the 33 markets are open with no or minimal restrictions, and 10 more are either now open for vaccinated passengers or will be in the next 2 months, including the US and the UK. We endorse IATA's continued call for governments to work with the industry to develop roadmaps for the phased reopening of borders based on international standards and a solid risk-based approach. The Board strongly supported the continued development of the IATA Travel Pass as a digital alternative to the unsustainable manual verification of passenger documentation. Finally, the Board thanked IATA for its strong leadership over the last 18 months in securing relief from slot rules that are not fit for purpose during the pandemic. In summary, the Board fully supported IATA's efforts to date to promote the industry during this COVID-19 crisis. However, we also urge Willie and the team to redouble their efforts as we emerge from the pandemic and enter the endemic phase of this disease. Let me now turn to the issue of sustainability, which is the other major topic that we have discussed, has been discussed by the Board in every meeting we've had over the last year. Before doing so, I'd like to play a short video from a friend who is a great supporter of aviation, as well as a champion of climate change.
Hello everyone, and special thanks to Robin Hayes, Willie Walsh, and the International Air Transport Association Board for the invitation. I grew up in Medford, Massachusetts, not too far from where many of you are sitting now. Since then, airplanes have taken me to places I never could have dreamed of. I even became a helicopter, seaplane, fixed-wing, multi-engine, and instrument-rated pilot, and I'm a devoted reader of Aviation Week. So hopefully I have enough credentials to be part of this conference. My appreciation for the people who work in your industry only grew during my time as mayor of New York. After all, you helped us increase our number of annual visitors to record highs, which created thousands of good jobs across the city. Of course, the pandemic has created massive challenges for air travel. But by taking smart public health precautions, airlines have helped keep their passengers and crew safe. Today, I know you're discussing the biggest challenges facing the industry, including how it can be a stronger ally in the fight against climate change, which is so important. So good luck, and I hope to be reading about it in the next issue of Aviation Week in Space Technology. All the best.
Thank you, Mayor Goodberg. In his address earlier, Willie very eloquently outlined the case for committing to a target of net zero carbon emissions from aviation by 2050, and the challenges and costs associated with meeting that target. At our board meetings, IATA has outlined the various issues that we need to consider before endorsing a resolution that commits the industry to the 2050 net zero carbon emissions target. These include the substantial costs as well as the imperative of full support from governments and all other industry stakeholders, particularly the producers of sustainable aviation fuels, aircraft and engine manufacturers, airports, and air navigation service providers. We've had some spirited debates, as you would expect, but let me be clear. The discussion was not about the result that we need to achieve. It was about how we get our partners to each play their role. We need results, not just empty promises. The board strongly endorsed the resolution that will be put to the AGM for adoption shortly. We did so in large part based on what we believe are two indisputable truths. First, it is clear that this commitment is the right thing to do for our industry and humanity. Secondly, while Willie rightfully points out that our industry was ahead of others in addressing our climate footprint, failure to make this additional commitment to net zero will leave others to set targets for us and leave us without a credible voice in the discussion. Keep in mind that some governments, including here in the US, are pushing for more aggressive carbon reduction targets, and others have made it clear that they are perfectly comfortable restraining our growth through excessive and non-productive taxes. The ICAO General Assembly, as we heard earlier, will take place in September 2022, and climate change will be at the top of that agenda. We cannot afford to go into the Assembly without a clear commitment as an industry to address our carbon footprint. Your board and I, as its chair, is urging the AGM to adopt this resolution as a critical step towards ensuring our license to operate over the coming decades. While COVID-19 and sustainability were the primary topics discussed at the board meeting since the last AGM, I would like to briefly cover some other important topics we have addressed over the last 12 months. On BSP China, Willie briefed the board on the development and implementation of an alternative settlement system in China by the China Air Transport Association. The board noticed its concern that this alternative system could fragment the market and result in high settlement costs for all participating global BSP carriers, and we encourage IATA to continue to explore ways with Qatar to avoid this result. On diversity, equity and inclusion, the board has had a good discussion on critical equity and inclusion in our workplace. Aviation just cannot afford to leave behind the talent, skills and insights that these individuals and other diverse groups contribute to our industry. 76 member airlines have joined IATA's 25 by 2025 campaign, which commits them to increase the number of women in senior positions by either 25% or to a minimum representation of 25% by 2025, and increase the number of women in underrepresented jobs, including pilots and operations, using the same metrics. As board chair, I personally hope and ask that more of our members join us in this initiative. The Diversity and Inclusion Awards presentation later will celebrate role models, showcase our progress, and remind us to continue to challenge ourselves to be better in this important area. Finally, Willie briefed the board on the reorganization he implemented early in his term to ensure that our association is fit for purpose to meet the current and future challenges facing our industry. The board also reviewed the report of its audit committee and approved the financial statements of IATA for 2020. I'm very pleased to report that despite the current economic crisis, the association continues to enjoy a sound financial position with a debt-free balance sheet and effective internal controls and processes. The board also approved its recommendation of its chair committee that the 2020 membership dues be maintained to a total of $12.6 million, and that the 2022 membership financial assessment resolution be presented to the IATAAGM for approval, which will be doing shortly. That concludes my report on the deliberations of the board since our last annual general meeting. Now, normally at this time, the board chair would thank IATA for its support and introduce his or her successor. However, last year, seeing the impact of COVID-19 was having, the board graciously asked me to stay on as board chair until the AGM of June 2022, which I accepted. I look forward to working with Willie, his team, and all of you as we continue to address the challenges and opportunities facing this great and amazing industry. I now turn to the adoption of the proposed policy resolution on the industry's commitment to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050 that I mentioned in my report. This resolution was uploaded to the AGM extranet site that all member airlines have access to on the 16th of September 2021. I propose this resolution as CEO of JetBlue Airways and the chair of the IATA Board of Governors for adoption by the AGM, which is seconded by Carsten Spohr, thank you Carsten, CEO of Lufthansa and IATA's current past chair of the board. Are there any questions or objections?
So I see that there are a number of comments and questions that we have received online to this resolution. At the moment, I don't see any hands raised in the room. I will come back to the questions and comments that have been received online in just a moment. First, I remind you that if any chief delegate of any member airline wishes to raise any question or objection to this resolution, you have 1 minute to do so, starting now. So returning to the questions and comments that we have received online. The first question, actually a comment, is received from China Southern Airlines. China Southern says that it is hoped that IATA can respect the objective facts and the actual difficulties faced by airlines in different countries and regions, and reflect the basic principles of global climate governance, namely the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities in its resolution. At the same time, the government should strengthen assistance to airlines in developing countries, call on governments and stakeholders to increase financial assistance to airlines in developing countries, and link policy assistance with the formulation of emission reduction targets. Willie, is there anything you'd like to comment on to that query?
No, I would just like to acknowledge that our member airlines in China have clearly looked closely at the policy of the Chinese government, which is to achieve net zero by 2060, which is a different timeline to the one that we're proposing. I think the airlines, certainly very well articulated by our good friend Chairman Liu, who's a member of the Board of Governors, has consistently supported IATA's ambition in relation to net zero, but has pointed out that the timeline of 2050 is inconsistent with the objectives of the Chinese government, and did encourage us to consider whether we could amend our proposal to 2060. The view of the Board of Governors was that that would not be an amendment that could be acceptable, and therefore we proposed the resolution that you see today, which is to achieve net zero by 2050. However, I have to reinforce the view that Chairman Liu has on a number of occasions reiterated his support for achieving net zero, but was mindful of the fact that the target is inconsistent with what is being adopted in China.
Thank you, Willie. Returning to the online questions and comments that have been received, and Willie, the comments that you made with cargo believes IATA should follow the basic principles of governing global climate issues and abide by the CBDR stipulated in the Paris Climate Conference and intended nationally determined contributions principles, allowing different countries to independently choose the mid and long-term goals and pathway of implementation to suit their national conditions, and different airlines form carbon emission targets that is in line with their country's conditions so as to pragmatically demonstrate the determination and confidence of the global aviation industry in dealing with climate change and carbon emission reductions. Over to you.
I would repeat what I said. The position just outlined is consistent with the position that has been consistently presented by Chairman Liu of China Eastern at the meetings held by the Board of Governors. We acknowledge the intentions of the Chinese carriers in the way they have expressed their questions and expressed their support for net zero, but again have questioned whether the timeline 2050 is an acceptable timeline given that the intention of the Chinese government is to achieve net zero emissions in 2060.
Thank you, Willie. The same comment is made actually by a number of other Chinese airlines as well. So just for the record, China Eastern Airlines has made a similar comment as I've just referred to and responded to. China Eastern also makes a comment, and it's actually in relation to the supplementary report that was distributed to members onto the AGM Extranet site yesterday in regards to the reference to public health measures in that document. China Eastern, as well as some other Chinese carriers, request a change of the wording of all of the Western vaccines into some vaccines. China Eastern and other Chinese airlines do not believe that vaccines should be an issue of discrimination. And IATA should not be in a position to judge the effect of Western, Eastern, or other vaccines. Do you have any comments on that?
I think it's fair to acknowledge the comment that he's made, and we will certainly look at the suggestion made by Chairman Liu of China Eastern.
Thank you. At this time, can I just see whether there are any hands raised in the room that would like to speak? I see that a hand is raised. Thank you very much for that. Can I ask, please, if you can put your microphone on, if you can announce your name, the airline that you represent, and also your question, comment, or objection to this resolution?
Thank you very much. From Saudi Arabia. I'd like to reconfirm our support and agreement to the aspirational goal of achieving net zero emissions. However, I believe the aviation industry should encourage all means and technologies to achieve that goal without limiting it to sustainable aviation fuel. What might appear impractical nowadays could be one of the most outstanding options in the future given the rapid advances in technology.
Thank you. Would you like to comment on that?
Thank you once again for your contribution during the debate of the Board of Governors, and we acknowledge your strong support for the net zero 2050 target. I think your point about being technology agnostic is well taken. It's clear that the pathway that we have identified is an example of a pathway. We don't say it is the only pathway that will be followed, and I've no doubt that when we return to our AGM next year and we update you on the progress that we have made, we will be identifying additional measures that have been identified, additional potential solutions that are available to us, and continue to encourage the adoption of all forms of technology to achieve the goal of net zero in 2050. Thank you again.
Thank you. I have some further comments and queries online that I would like to address. There are some queries and comments online where I cannot determine whether the chief delegate from member airline was actually proposing them. So I would ask that if you have put something online and you've not identified your airline, could you please just tag that and message back to me. In the meantime, while we wait for that, I have a further comment regarding from China Eastern Airlines again, and a change to the wording of, actually, sorry, we've just dealt with that with the public health measures. I'm seeing nothing else online. Can I see whether there are any further questions, comments, objections in the room? I see none at this time, thank you. I'll just check. I have a comment that has come in from Ma Chongjian. I'm not clear whether that is what airline is from. China Southern. China Southern. The comment is actually a proposal to amend the resolution. The proposal is that the CBDR shall be included in the resolution on carbon emissions, as CBDR requires all mankind to take responsibility for climate change, while the responsibility should be differentiated as the cause and effect of climate change are different. Will you want to comment on anything further other than what you have said?
Well, if it's a formal proposal that needs to be seconded before we meet,
Yes. Before we go to that, I just wanted to check no further comments. Thank you. So, on the basis that we have received a proposal from China Southern to amend the resolution as I have just outlined, in accordance with Rule 22B of the Rules of Procedure at General Meetings, I will treat this as a proposal to amend the original motion on the industry's commitment to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050, which has been put to the AGM for approval today. Under Rule 22BI of the Rules of Procedure at General Meetings, as China Southern has proposed the amendment, a chief delegate from another member airline is sought to second the proposed amendment. Do I have a seconder? In the room, as far as I can see, and at the moment we do not have a seconder to that proposed motion online. On the basis that there are no seconders to the proposed motion to the amendment of the resolution that has been put to the AGM for approval today, under the rules, the proposal for the amendment will now not be considered. And Robin, we have no further questions in the room, and we have no further additional questions online. So you can now proceed to declare the motion in relation to the original resolution approved.
Okay, there being no questions or objections, I declare the resolution on the industry's commitment to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050 adopted. Okay, thank you for working through that. I think a real hybrid meeting there. We're getting comments from all over the world and in the room. Okay, let me now turn to item 7, which are the financial resolutions submitted for adoption by the board, contained in items 7 and 8 of the agenda for today's meeting. Item 7 deals with IATA's financial statements for 2020 and the appointment of auditors for 2021. Upon recommendation of the Audit Committee, the Board of Governors proposes the following: that the consolidated financial statements for the year ended 31 December 2020 be and are hereby accepted, and that Ernst & Young be appointed as auditors for the calendar year 2021, as such remuneration as the Board of Governors may approve. The IATA Board of Governors proposes resolution for adoption by the AGM, which I, as AGM President, second. Are there any questions or objections?
I see that there are no objections or questions either received in the room or online at this time. If any chief delegate of any member airline wishes to raise any question or objection to this resolution, you have 1 minute to do so starting now. If no objections are received, the resolution will be treated as approved and we will move to the next agenda item. If an objection is received, an electronic vote will be opened and you will again have 1 minute to process your vote.
Okay, there being no questions or objections, I declare the resolution seeking the meeting's approval of the financial statements of IATA for 2020 and the appointment of auditors for the 2021 is approved. That feels good. Okay, item 8. We now turn to item 8, membership financial assessment for 2022. The IATA Board of Governors proposes the adoption of the membership financial assessment for 2022 as shown in agenda item number 8 of your documentation, which I, as President, second. Are there any questions or objections?
So I see that there are no objections or questions at this time that have been received in the room or online. If any chief delegate wishes to raise any question or an objection to this resolution, you have 1 minute to do so, starting now. Again, if no objections are received, it will be treated as approved and we will move to the next agenda item. And if an objection is received, we will proceed to an electronic vote, and you will again have 1 minute to cast your vote.
Okay, there being no questions or objections, I declare that the resolution on membership financial assessment for 2022 is approved. Okay, moving on to item 9. The next two items on the agenda relate to the elections of your representatives for the IATA Board of Governors and also the 2022 nominating committee. First, under agenda item number 9, you will also consider the recommendations of the 2021 nominating committee, which met on September 27th. On the basis of the nominations received, the 2021 nominating committee recommended individuals that appear on your screen now. This was also uploaded yesterday to the AGM extranet site that all member airlines were provided with the link to ahead of the meeting. Carsten Spohr, in his capacity as CEO of Lufthansa and chair of the 2021 nominating committee, proposes this slate of candidates to the AGM for approval, each for a 3-year term on the board. As AGM President, I second this. Are there any questions or objections?
I see that there is a hand raised in the room. Currently there is nothing online. I will come back to your hand in just 1 moment. But first, I'll remind you that if any chief delegates of any member airline wishes to raise an objection or a question to this resolution, you have 1 minute to do so starting now. Returning to the question that was received, or the hand that was received in the room, can I please invite you, using the microphone on the door table where you are seated, to announce your name, the airline you represent, and to ask your question or to state your objection.
Good morning, everybody. Captain Malik Al-Alawi, Gulfair. I have a Gulfair statement. Gulfair takes note of the recommendation of the nominating committee for the Board of the Governance, Middle East and North Africa region. We take note with regret that the Gulfair nomination, which was accepted by IATA as a valid nomination, has not been retained. Instead, a standing member had been extended beyond the constitutional 3-term rule. In light of this, Gulfair formally withdraws its nomination for the Board of Directors and the collective interest. Gulfair will continue to support IATA and the newly elected Board of Directors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. William, would you like to address that?
Thank you very much for that statement, and particularly thank you for your continued support, not just to the members of the Board of Governors, but to IATA, and look forward to working with you. But we appreciate your support and appreciate you making the statement today. Thank you.
Thank you, William. There are no further objections or questions either in the room or indeed online.
Great, there being no further questions or objections, I declare that the appointment to the board recommended by the 2021 nominating committee, the appointments to the board recommended by the 2021 nominating committee are approved. Now we turn to item 10. This item concerns the confirmation of appointments to the 2022 nominating committee. The nominating committee, as a reminder, is composed of 5 board members and 5 members not on the board. The 10 people listed in the document for item 10 that was uploaded yesterday to the AGM extranet site that all member airlines were provided with a link to ahead of this meeting are being shown on the screen now. They have kindly accepted to be appointed to the 2022 nominating committee. Their willingness to serve the association in this capacity is much appreciated. The IATA Board of Governors proposed this resolution for adoption by the AGM, which I, as AGM President, second. Are there any questions or objections?
I'm going to start the 1 minute clock from the beginning, as we are rather pushed for time, so the clock is starting for any objections or questions from the membership. At the moment, I see that there are no objections, questions or comments that have been received either in the room or online. If any chief delegate or any member of airline wishes to raise any question or objection, please do so now.
There being no further questions or objections, I declare that the appointments to the 2022 nominating committee are approved. Moving now to item 11, the AGM is asked to approve the resolution submitted for adoption at item 11 to amend IATA's Articles of Association to provide for the inclusion of Chinese as a language of IATA. The IATA Board of Governors proposed this resolution for adoption by the AGM, which I, as AGM President, second. Are there any questions or objections?
Again, starting the clock for the 1 minute countdown for questions or objections now. I see in the room and also online that there are currently no questions
There being no questions or objections, I declare the resolution to amend IATA's Articles of Association to provide for the inclusion of Chinese as a language of IATA as approved. On to item 12, the date and place of the 2022 annual general meeting. Now, on to as we close the session, it's a sort of tradition to talk about what will be the 78th AGM. The Board of Governors has received an invitation from China Eastern to host the next annual general meeting in Shanghai on June 19th to June 21, 2022. The Board of Governors proposes we accept this invitation, and as AGM President, I'm very pleased to second that proposal. Should there be any questions or objections to this proposal, please let us know by sending any through the AGM platform if you are joining this meeting online or by raising your hand here in the room in Boston. In allowing time for this, I would like to share with you, while we're allowing time for this, I'd like to share with you a video from China Eastern in relation to this proposal.
I want the whole world to wake you. Call upon us to sing. Told them all promises.
Dear Chloe, I'm in Shanghai now. It's a beautiful city. We saw many new teams. This is where my dad used.
So thank you very much to China Eastern and Chairman Liu for this wonderful invitation. We haven't got any questions or objections. Correct? So there being no questions or objections, I declare Shanghai to be the venue of the 2022 AGM, again on June 19 to 21. I declare that is approved. Thank you, Chairman Liu and the team at China Eastern, and speaking on behalf of all members, we're very much looking forward to your hospitality in Shanghai next year. Moving forward to item 13, any other business item, does any member want to raise anything else under this item before we close?
We'll start the 1 minute clock for particularly people who are joining the meeting online. Currently, I see that nobody has raised their hand here in the ballroom in Boston, and I see that there are no items being submitted in relation to this item online. As a reminder, if any chief delegate from any member airline wishes to raise any matter under this item, you are requested and invited to do that now.
Okay. No, we didn't have any actions under any other business, and there's no resolution. I don't get to use the gavel for that. So we'll move on to item 14. This brings us to the last item of the 77th AGM, which is the close of the meeting. Again, I'd just like to thank everyone for coming in person and joining around the world. So before we close, I'd just like to pass to the Director General, also really to say a few words.
Thank you, Robin. So as we bring the AGM to a close, we clearly have the walks to look forward to, and I know we're going to have a very interesting, fascinating debate this afternoon and tomorrow morning, and I encourage you all to attend. When we decided to hold this event in person a number of months ago, with full support, unanimous support of the Board of Governors, we clearly did not know what to expect. I have to say, I'm absolutely delighted that so many of you have made the effort to attend in person. I think it really does send out a strong message that we're back in business. It's disappointing that a number of our members, for various travel restriction reasons, were unable to join us, and I know everybody is looking forward to meeting in person again in Shanghai for what I think will be a fantastic AGM being hosted by China Eastern. I would, however, also at this point like to recognise that a lot of work has gone in to ensure that this AGM was a success. We've had fantastic support from JetBlue, who have worked really hard to ensure that this AGM could take place in person. And I want to extend my thanks to Robin and his team, who I think have done a wonderful job to make sure that this event could go ahead. Being a glutton for punishment, Robin, who's president and CEO of JetBlue, took on the role of board chair and then said he wanted to be the president of the AGM. So I don't know what's left for him to achieve after this grand slam. But it is a tradition, as you know, that having used the gavel so efficiently, I think the best I've seen so far. We have a small presentation for Robin so that he can practice his gavel skills over the weeks that goes ahead. Robert, thank you very much. It's been great to work with you in recent months and to ensure that this AGM can go ahead. I think it's also important that we take an opportunity to thank our sponsors. And we'll read them out so I don't miss anybody. Our gold sponsors, Airbus. Thanks again for a wonderful event last night. Boeing, who will host us this evening, GE and Shell, and our bronze sponsors, Accenture, AirCap, Aerospace Technologies Group, Air Lease Corporation, American Express, BOC Aviation, CAE, CFM, Sirium, Embraer, Inmarsat Aviation, MTU Maintenance, OAG, Pratt & Whitney, Rolls-Royce, and SMBC Aviation Capital. It's very important that we get the support of our sponsors. They are part of making this event a success, and I thank them all. I'd also like to thank our media partner, CNN, for all of their efforts. And finally, I'd like to thank the team at IATA, who have worked very hard under significant pressure and obviously given the conditions to ensure that we could go forward with this AGM. I want to thank my team on your behalf, and I'm sure you will get the opportunity to thank many of them in person during the rest of today and tomorrow. And finally, as always, thank you. The support that you give to IATA is critical. When I took on this role, I said IATA is here to serve and represent you. That's what we have to do. I commit that we will continue to do that. If there are any issues that you believe we need to address, please don't hesitate to contact myself or the rest of the team at IATA. We look forward to serving and representing you in the year ahead. We look forward to seeing you in Shanghai. But please enjoy the World Air Transport Summit for the rest of today and tomorrow. I look forward to seeing you either this evening at the events or over the next 2 days. Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, everyone, so that's the AGM. The formal part closed, as we said, lots of great things ahead, and a special one, we have our second annual Diversity and Inclusion Awards back in here at 11:15. It would be great to get as much support for that as possible. Thank you for the gathering. I think it would be missing special JetBlue meetings.